take a deep breath in and just blow it out. Again, breathe in, count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Father, we settle ourselves into this moment. And we thank you that, bitten or unbitten, you are ever present. So we thank you for that on today. We thank you for your constant awareness that you are our God and that you're in control of every little nuance, things coming in and going out, and life being upside down or right side up. We thank you for that on today. We bless you because you are the author and the finisher of our lives. And so we trust you. In everything that we say and do, we trust you. So we give you glory for this Monday morning, a day that we have never seen before. And yet you've graced us with an opportunity to be in it. So we thank you for it. We thank you that you have already prepared us for everything that will come our way on today. So we rest in the thought that everything that we need is within us right now. We bless you for that now. Now, God, guard our time together. Be in every word and every conversation. Bless those that are present and bless those that are absent on today and whatever's going on in their life. Father, you be the rectifying agent. And we will be so very careful to give your name the praise, the glory, and the honor. In Jesus' name we pray, and the class says,
Amen.
Amen. Amen means let it be so. All right, so I've passed out some handouts, which are our lecture slides on today. And I'm going to open up with if there's any questions. I'm hearing that the quiz or the test is no longer available. Is anybody having that same issue? Okay. So after class today, I'll go snag a computer because I can't fix anything on my iPad. So I'll snag a computer and we're going to try something out. We're going to try Tuesday at midnight and see if that regulates. I don't know. All right. So we'll do that afterwards. I sent out a brief email to a bunch of you because I haven't received an update to your first paper. And so if you've got an email from me that says your paper is not in Populi, please submit that as soon as possible. All right, any other questions, comments, concerns, things that's going on that I may need to take a look at? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Amen. All right, so let's move through this. What my plan is today is to spend today in chapter 5 because we've got to move to chapter 6. So today we'll look at developing lifespan from infancy to adulthood, and we'll just take an overview. And we won't go into in-depth about any of the developmental psychology pieces of it, but I'll give you an overview of what that looks like, and we'll go from there. So today we'll be in chapter 5. Wednesday, the hopes is that we're moving closer to chapter 6 and closer to where our syllabus is, because we are a little bit behind the ball here. All right. I am going to I'm not going to put these slides up because that would mean my brain would have to work now. And I just don't want to focus. So I have a couple of videos that I will show you. And just to risk toggling between slides and videos, use the slides that I printed for you. And then we're going to move. All right, ready, set, go. All right, so developmental psychologies. So developmental psychology studies a couple of different things. So it looks at the life cycle. It looks at the conception to death. It looks at 3 different components: developing physically, cognitively, socially. Okay. So there's 3 issues that are pervasive in this study. So number 1 is relative to the impact that our genes, our experiences, and our behaviors have on our life. All of those play a contributing part to who we become as people. Number 2, whether development is best described as gradual or a continuous sequence of predetermined stages. And so that's still out there. The researchers are still trying to figure out, are we constantly developing through stages? Is some of this stuff genetics, that because mom was the way that she was, I'm going to be the way that mom was, or I'm going to be different? Could things be the way that they are in my life because I am the way that I am? Right? It's one of those inquisitive types of questions. Number 3, it looks at whether the individual's personality remains stable or changes over the lifespan. And some of us may have our own critique on whether or not my personality has changed since I was a teenager, since I was a kid, to now. You know, is there maturation going on? Is there maturity? And some of you may have to ask your parents, and they go, you was that way when you was 2. You'll be that way when you die. Right? You were always about you, and you're going to be about you till you die. Or you've always been a giving, nurturing person. And so you will be that giving, nurturing person throughout the ages. So those are some things that we'll just take a look at. Researchers who emphasize experience and learning tend to see development as a slow, continuous process. Those who emphasize biological maturation, and maturation is just maturity, looking at the lifespan over years, they tend to see development as a series of genetically predisposed stages. And some of you have already done your developmental paper and got it in by last Friday, so you know some of this stuff already. So some of the theories that we're going to look at just briefly are going to be Piaget, anybody know what Piaget came up with? Stages of development. He did research from childhood to death, and he created 4 initial stages of development. So we'll walk through some of these theorist perspectives. All right, so Piaget, Kohlberg, and Erickson have been modified in the light of later research. Each theory usually alerts us to the differences among people of different ages and different stages of life. And it helps us see a lifespan as a perspective because of the age, because of experiences socially, and because of genetics. All right, the life cycle begins with one sperm, unites with a mature egg to form what's called a zygote. Attached to the uterine wall, and this is just the stages of development, it develops into what we call an embryo. Embryo begins to form an organism, forms a body. About 9 weeks it takes to become what's called a fetus. That's recognizably a human. With the aid of new methods of studying babies, researchers have discovered that newborns are surprisingly smart. Some kids are really competent. Infants develop skills like sitting, standing, walking in a predictable sequence. These are some of the things they found out. That their timing is a function of individual maturation. All right, so from here, I'm just going to show you a video of what I've already told you, and we're going to move forward. Let's go here. And the video is entitled what? Conception to birth. Let me find it and I'll show it to you. Okay. Are they on?
Looks like they might be. Oh, and there you go.
Any day now, any day now.
Wow, it's just
And there's no sound, so you have to use your imagination. All right, the sound should be up, right?
You have to just imagine the scientific terminology.
It's a text. All right, I'm going to unplug this because
I got it.
all right, is there sound? Let's do this. Let's stop it and let's start it again. Let's see. Let's come out of that. And let's do it. And let's play. Okay. All right, if I can't get that to play, I'm going to move on. So it doesn't look like it's. I'm just trying to figure out if it's operator area, or if it's this thing here. So. Okay, let's try again. All right, so I'm moving you forward to just the developmental video, because that other video is going to stress me, and I refuse to be stressed on the video. So.
Cognition refers to all the mental activities associated with thinking, knowing, remembering, and communicating. From the time we first open our eyes to perceive the world, how does our mind develop from there? Developmental psychologist Jean Piaget spent his life searching for the answers to such questions. Where others saw childish mistakes, Piaget saw intelligence at work. Thanks partly to his contributions, we now understand that a child's mind is not a miniature model of an adult's. Children reason differently and are incapable of adult logic.
And he noticed certain patterns in mistakes in intelligence tests and then in his own test that indicated differences in reasoning at what he ultimately saw as different stages of development.
As a child advances to each new stage, his thinking is qualitatively different from that of the previous stage. Piaget's core idea is that the driving force behind our intellectual progression is an unceasing struggle to make sense of our experiences. To this end, the maturing brain builds schemas, concepts or mental molds into which we pour our experiences. But how do we use these schemas? Piaget called these processes assimilation and accommodation. In assimilation, the child interprets new experiences in terms of the things he or she already knows into existing schemas. For example, a toddler might call anything with 4 wheels a car. However, when the child encounters new information, he or she must adjust the current understanding through accommodation. Here, the child cognitively makes distinctions between schemas, so the same toddler might learn that trucks also have 4 wheels and have to refine the original schema of cars to fit with this new information. Piaget thought that we continually alter our schemas through our lifespan, and that these stages could be grouped into predictable patterns.
The 4 major stages are sensory motor, pre-operational, concrete operational, and formal operational.
In the sensory motor stage, from birth to nearly age 2, babies take in the world through their senses and actions.
Infants have a receptive vocabulary that can be quite large by the end of the first year. So at the very beginning, it's recognizing sights and sounds and making sense of it. If you see a baby, as soon as they move their head, they're organizing their world and trying to actively be part of it.
Very young babies seem to live in the present. Out of sight is out of mind. That is, infants lack object permanence, or the awareness that things continue to exist even when they are out of sight.
The baby acts as if, according to Piaget, the baby has no longer any representation of that object, and so doesn't grasp for the object. It's as if the object is now out of sight and it's out of mind.
Following the sensory motor stage, Piaget believes that until about ages 6 or 7, children are in a pre-operational stage, too young to perform mental operations.
So, for example, if I physically change the appearance of a glass of water by taking from a beaker and pouring it into a long cylinder, you know that the amount of water, unless I spilled some, hasn't changed at all.
Now, which glass has more juice? This one or this one?
This one.
What's important to the pre-operational child is the change in physical appearance. Okay?
That has more.
Why do you think it has more?
You and I know that there's neither more nor less in there. At the end of the pre-operational period, the child articulates that. But until the child gets there, what he or she says is, there's more because it's higher.
Piaget called this concept conservation, the principle that the properties of the substance remain the same even if it changes shape.
There's a lot of juice.
Additionally, Piaget contended that preschool children are egocentric. They have difficulty perceiving things from another's point of view. Though egocentrism persists, they slowly develop an ability to infer others' mental states when they begin forming a theory of mind. They seek to understand the perspective of others and begin to interact by teasing, empathizing, and persuading. Then, according to Piaget, by about 6 or 7 years old, children enter the concrete operational stage, at which point they become capable of true logical thought.
One thing to remember as we talk about concrete and then formal is they're getting more and more like us, so the differences aren't as stark, but they're still there.
Now which glass has more juice? This one, or the same?
This one.
Why do you think that one has more juice?
Because there's a little lash.
If you think about situations you've been in, you can capture what concrete intelligence is. It's a focus on the present, on the here and now.
We have the same. We have the same.
By age 12, our reasoning expands from purely concrete to encompass abstract thinking. As children approach adolescence, many become capable of solving hypothetical problems and deducing consequences. If this, then that. Where does Piaget's work stand today?
There's a tremendous respect for Piaget for founding the field and for showing why knowledge has to be built up. We're able to see Piaget as foundational in the field and realize that if we focus on the specifics of when such and such happens, we're missing the big point. And the big point was, in my opinion, that children are creating their own development, that they're actively engaged in making sense of the world. And I think that is just absolutely true. And in fact, we're trying to make education of that form, that it allows the child to construct actively the meanings of things like number and mathematics, whatever it might be, science. So once we got past the first idea, well, children couldn't do this because Piaget said they couldn't do it. Then sort of children could do anything because Piaget was wrong. And now it's like, how do we teach to a way that makes sense of the children's mind and allows them to actively engage and construct their own meaning? And so it's still very interesting from an adult cognitive point of view because it sort of shows how the mind is made.
Today, we are layering new findings atop Piaget's foundational work as we seek to understand the development of our cognition from birth to adulthood.
All right, so this is Piaget stages. 24 months, 7 years to adult. All right, so just to back up, in your slides, all right, so the developmental phases, when you're talking about the embryo state, so this is slide number 3. So it talks about going from being just a zygote is what it's called. A zygote is that mature egg, and from the 9 weeks of that gestation period, and so it goes to be that zygote, begins at the zygote, turns into the embryo, and becomes a fetus. And we're just going to do a snapshot of this. That's the right slide. Let's do. All right. Well, I was trying to get your slides up here, but my brain may not let me find it. And that's okay. So use your handout. You guys are clever kids. You can figure this out. All right. So slide number 3. Zygote, embryo, fetus. So zygote is that mature egg that takes that 9-week gestation period to actually become a fetus. Within that fetus, in the next 6 weeks, the body organisms begin to form and function by 9 weeks. So you're actually a developing person. So just running through some of these slides, you go through a prenatal development period. Teratogens, fetal alcohol syndrome. This pretty much just talks about, and this is the 4th slide in, talks about how if the mother is a drinker during pregnancy, it affects the kid. And so in a nutshell, that's what that's telling you. And it affects how they think, how they behave, how they perceive the world because of a need for that substance to be in the body. All right, so the competent newborn. The newborn arrives with an automatic reflex responses that supports survival. So you may see things like the sucking or the tonguing, the swallowing, breathing. They may elicit cries to get your attention. And then when they realize that if they cry loud enough, you'll come, they'll cry loud enough till you come. If they realize if I keep crying and nobody's come, I learn how to self-soothe. Searches for sights and sounds linked to one another, smells and sees well, and uses sensory equipment to learn. Possesses a biological rooted temperament. All right, so we're going to move. I am going to the slide. This is infancy and childhood physical development. Brain cells, this is on page 2. Brain cells are sculpted by heredity and experience. From birth, you have the neural growth and spurts, the synaptic pruning. 3 to 6 months, rapid frontal lobe. You're learning a lot of information very quickly in a short span of time, and it continues to grow. And this is a critical period for early development. What do you think happens to kids when between this time frame they experience trauma? What happens when trauma is introduced early on in that developmental phase? What do you think happens to the brain or the frontal lobe or how they develop? What do you think?
However they, I guess, dealt with it at the time is what will develop as they grow older. So if the trauma causes them to like close themselves off from communicating, then they'll develop that.
Sure, yeah.
I was going to say the same thing, like something that you're scarred for a while. My brother, he's 10 years old now, but I don't know when exactly, when he was probably like a month-old baby. We took him to Chuck E. Cheese, and he was so scared of Chuck E. Cheese, and then it literally to he's like, oh, mommy, and he's like 10 years old. I'm like, it's just a costume, but he will freak out.
Yes, they begin to link up, right? Remember we did the whole dendrites and taking in information and collecting that information and filtering it through and passing it through and coming up with the terminal branches to help make decisions and explain how we will respond to society. Well, they're taking in information and they're deducing, what does this mean to me? Pain versus pleasure. So as a kid, through my attachment phases, I can link up whether coming closer to mom is going to equal pleasure or pain. And if I link up that it produces pleasure, then I'm going to want mom around all the time. She's nice to me. Who is this woman? She's beautiful. She's nice to me. I want her around all the time. But if it equals pleasure, if it equals pain, then when mom comes around, what do you think the baby's going to do? Come on, this is not rocket science. Hide. Yes, they're going to hide. They're going to cry. They're going to push away. You ever picked up a baby and they look at you and go, I don't like the way you look. They push away, right? Because they're trying to make meaning of all of these things. All right. Infancy, childhood, motor development. Develop as nervous system and muscles mature. Their motor skills develop as their nervous system and as their muscle memory matures. Are primarily universal in sequence, and they talked about how kids may babble, may crawl, may walk, stammer, and there's a sequence of development that happens here. They're guided by genes and influenced by their environment. Involves the same sequence throughout the world. All right, so the stages of development, they've proven have become some system that everybody goes through some of these similar phases. If the child is born as what they would deem normal, a normal childbirth. All right, motor development, walking. In the U.S., 25% walk by 11 months. 50% walk by 12 months. 90%. By 15 months, you should be walking, you should be moving. Novice walkers, they fell at least 32 times on average, took 1,500 steps, traveled 3 times the distance as a crawler. So as they begin walking, as things slow down until they increase those muscles and muscle memory kicks in, and now they're just like riding a bicycle. They're like, let's get up, let's do this thing. And you notice when they get up and do this thing, then they're ready to explore into other things, or pulling stuff off the cabinets, into a whole bunch of stuff, because now I'm ready to explore and learn more. All right, now moving forward to Piaget's. Piaget's work, we looked at infancy to childhood and the cognitive development. Children are thinkers. They are thinkers. Their mind develops through a series of universal, irreversible stages, from simple reflexes to adult abstract reasoning. Children's maturing brains build schemas. And so a schema is a pattern of thought or behavior that organizes or categorizes information. Remember we talked about as a kid, if your mom says don't touch that stove, but you're just an inquisitive kid and you're going to be a chef. So you walk up and put your hand on that eye and realize that's hot. Will mom have to tell you again not to touch the stove?
Nope.
No, your experience has taught you that we don't touch that. Now what happens if that experience is not corrected or is not retrained and you become a college student and you gotta eat? Would you be a chef or not? What do you think? No. People are like, dude, I don't cook. I don't go near the oven. Microwave is my thing. Why? Because as a kid, I was traumatized by an oven, and now I don't want to touch the oven unless someone comes back around and says, this is an oven mitt. You don't touch this, you touch the pot, and you put the pot on the oven, right? And when somebody comes back and reteaches, relearns, then that negative information that was input can now be tossed out. And you can bring on some more developmental processes to get you your goal, right? Now, has that happened in other areas of life? Yeah, well, we've linked up a certain thing was bad or a certain thing was wrong as a kid. And as an adult, we learn differently. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes. All right. Yes.
Yes. Amen.
All right. So let's move. So Jean Piaget theorized that the mind develops by forming schemas. They help us to assimilate our experiences, and that must occasionally be altered to accommodate new information. That's why I like the word confusion. Oh, so I'm confused. So confusion is not always negative. Confusion just means there's some new information that's been introduced that contradicts the old information. And so now I got to take an examination of the old information and see how does that gel or how does that mesh with this new information in order for me to make a new schema. Right? And we're doing that all the time. Oh, hold on. That confuses what I learned when I was at church. Or that confuses what I learned when I was over here doing this thing. Or in this class they taught me this. And now you're telling me this. How do these two things come together to make sense in my brain? So we're creating new schemas all the time. All right. In this way, children progress from simplicity of the sensory motor stage, where we're just learning by observing, feeling, sensing, smelling, tasting, through the increasing complex pre-operational and concrete operational stages to abstract, formal operational thought. All right, infants become attached to their parents largely because they are comfortable, familiar, and responsive. When I cry, you come. Denied such care, children become withdrawn, anxious, and may eventually become abusive. Self-concepts develop gradually, but by age 8 or 10, Children's self-images are quite stable and are linked with their independence, optimism, and sociability. Now, food for thought. What happens to an adult if, as a kid, they were highly sheltered, were not allowed to go outside? Everywhere they went, they had to have somebody holding my hand, somebody giving me something, never allowed to be independent in their choices or decisions. Somebody told me how to think, told me what to choose. And as an adult, when I grow up, what would be my experience, or what would be my life? What do you think?
They gravitate towards relationships that have that kind of structure.
Yeah, they become dependent. Yeah, highly dependent on someone else's choices, someone else's decision. If you say, hey, what do you want for dinner? Well, what do you want? Well, I want pizza. Well, I'll just have what you want. But your taste buds are not my taste buds. What do you want? I'll just have what you have. Well, where are you going? I'm going to the library. Well, I'll go to the library too. Don't you have something else to do? Right? They become overly dependent. And that dependency is a direct result of how they were nurtured, the nature versus the nurture, how they were nurtured. But they learn differently as they are challenged, right? So when you challenge them and say, hey, why don't you go over there and learn that, and I'll meet you in an hour. Are you sure? I'm positive that you can do this. Yes. Go right over there and talk to that professor, and I'll be right here when they get done talking to you. Will you really be right here? Yes. If you are an independent person, that dependency may become a little irritating, right? Because you're wanting people in your sphere of influence who are just as dependent as you are, independent as you are, right? All right. So you become a part of their learning. All right, adolescence typically begins with puberty, with the onset of rapid growth and sexual maturity. They begin to feel and to know who they are as individuals and where they desire to go as an adult. Jean Piaget theorized that adolescents develop the capacity to reason abstractly. Following Piaget's lead, Lawrence Kohlberg contended that moral thinking, likewise, proceeds through stages, from a morality of self-interest to a morality of universal ethical principles. What is morally good and acceptable? Erik Erikson theorized that a chief task of adolescence is to form one's identity. Now, consequently, many of us form our identity as an adolescent by our group, or by our cliques, or by our club. For example, if I'm a part of the soccer team, then my culture becomes what everybody else's culture is. It becomes a part of what they like to do, the things they like to watch. Why? Because I spend most of my time learning in that environment. Versus if I'm an independent student and I'm a loner and I learn through exploration. And so I like to go off and explore different things and learn different things. And I don't normally like to be bothered when I'm learning. I develop differently. My social abilities may be different. The person that grew up in the group may actually like being a part of a team. I can't see myself outside of a team. So I graduate from that cultural experience or that sport experience, and I go to an organization and I find the team. I've got to be a part of a team. Versus the individual that says, just leave me alone, give me my work, let me work. Don't talk to me, don't text me, don't email me. I just want to do my work and go home. We learn through our experiences. Does that make sense? Yeah, so our experiences are causing us to become. Now, there are people who have learned how to be the introvert and the extrovert. How do I learn that? I learned through the things that I've suffered. The Bible says something about that, right? I learned because, okay, I cannot be a leader and be isolated. I cannot be in a group and not be an individual. I have to be my own person, even if I'm a part of this larger organization. Right? And so we learn those things as we develop. And it's up to us to develop those social skills that we need in the time that we need it. You may not always have to be the leader. But when a leader is needed, you may be the one that will rise up and go, hey, I think we should do this. Who made you the leader of this group? All of y'all, because nobody stood up and did it. So I self-elected myself to say, we're going to do this today. Right? And mostly if it's a logical and good decision and nobody else has any better decision, they'll go, let's just go with her idea. That's great. Let's just do that. We trust her judgment. And you're challenging yourself to sharpen a side of the brain that had not been challenged before. Amen?
Amen.
All right. Let's move. What does that look like? All right. So the struggle may continue into the adult years as new relationships emerge and new roles are assumed. The time from 18 to the mid-20s is an increasingly not yet settled phase of life called emerging adulthood. After 65, declining perceptual acuity, strength, stamina are evident. Short-term ailments are fewer. Research suggests that people are not predictable, as some stage theorists have argued. Life events and even chance occurrences influence adult life in unanticipated ways. The death of a loved one, the death of a pet may change your perception on how you view people or how you view having a pet. It changes your perception. And so it's hard for researchers to put a thumbprint on those things because how it affects you may be very different from how it affects me. And that's how God made us as individuals. Two basic aspects of lives, love and work. Dominant adulthood, most people retain a sense of well-being throughout life. All right, so let me see if I have this slide, and if I don't, I'll just tell you about it. So one of the slides that I had, it's going to be in here. All right, so I thought this slide was pretty funny. And it just talks about when kids are born, you've got the play. Several years of life, all you're doing is play. This is where they've developed a lot of the play therapy. Because as you're playing with kids are developing skills on how to socialize, skills on how to respect my things and your things, skills on how to ask for what they want. And as we develop, we go to school, and school is a combination of play, school. When you go to lunch, you go to class for a few minutes, you go play. Then you come back to class, you go play. You go back to class, you go play. And then between here and there, you get introduced to a first love, brief happiness, that's over. Break up, grab, hate I even dated him or she sucks. And so you go through school, then you go back to play, work, right? Because there has to be balance. When you're most creative is when you learn the most. It's when your brain is open and is releasing chemicals where you can learn and work. And so you go through some idealism, who you think you are and who others think you are. Effort, rejection. Everybody deals with a little rejection. Rejection helps you learn about who you are and who you want to be. Failure, work, effort, failure, compromise. Work. Then you go through a whole series of life in adulthood where you got a whole bunch of work and a little bit of play on the weekends. Retire, play, die. So I thought that was funny. All right, so this is our overview of chapter 5. Now we may revisit chapter 5 at a later date. Wednesday we're going to move on to chapter 6 to get you closer to where we are in our syllabus. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Any questions? You got 1 minute. 59, 58.
Pressure's on.
Right. This is clear as mud.
Yeah.
All right. So I will put the slides. I already did it. I uploaded it in the Populi. So if you want to go back and look at the slides, you can look at the slides and get more information.
For that testing tonight, can we use notes
Yes, you can use everything I've given you. Great. Yes. Now I couldn't get the video uploaded. It wouldn't let me download it, but you got enough information to get through the test. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. God bless you guys. Have a great week.
There should be able to like load a video where it has like a